Holy shit, everybody is saying this is the scariest film from 2024.
This is the scariest film of the year.
There's a scene in this film that made something shrivel up and go inside of me.
This is the first horror movie of the year to actually scare me.
That everyone is saying is the scariest horror movie of 2024.
This is the scariest horror movie of 2024 so far.
And I watched it last night, and I have some thoughts. My name's Ricky, I love horror movies, and this is Oddity. So this movie was released this year and was directed by Damien McCarthy. He is the guy that brought us one of my favourite horror movies, Caveat. The movie centres around a woman called Darcy. Darcy has a twin who lives in this house with her husband, and Darcy's sister, Darcy's twin, is brutally unalived one night. Darcy believes that she is psychic. She works in a shop that sells oddities, and she thinks that her sister's unaliving isn't as simple as people are making out, and she sets out to use her psychic abilities to prove this and seek revenge. So I really like this film. I love Damien McCarthy. I love Caveat. That's one of my favourite horror films. It's very rare nowadays that you see a horror movie that is somewhat original. The thing I love most about Oddity is it feels original. It feels fresh. Sure, the storyline is somewhat similar to other films that we may have seen, but Oddity does it in a really original way. Now, do I think that this is the scariest movie from 2024? So that's a tricky question because 2024 has been a really excellent year for horror. But I wouldn't say that 2024 has produced the scariest films ever made. Is Oddity one of the best horror films this year? I personally don't think so. I think it's a very good horror film. But the quality of horror we've had this year has been really up there. So is Oddity the scariest film from 2024? I think so. But that's because there hasn't been many really scary films. There's been excellent films, there's been amazing horror films, but none of them have been very scary. Oddity is the only movie this year that I would consider an actually scary film, a movie that has made me jump. So in that regards, yes, people are telling the truth. Oddity is the scariest film from 2024, but it's not the best horror film from 2024. Quite similar to Hell House LLC, The Carmichael Manor. That came out at the end of last year, I believe, and it was at the top of most people's lists as the scariest movie from last year, but it certainly wasn't the best movie from last year. Oddity is very similar to that. But it is a very good film, and it's a very scary film, so if you want to be spooked, check Oddity out.
These 5 movies truly scared me, but every single one of them in a different way, and I don't see anybody talking about them. I'm Chuck. I'd love to be your movie guy. Hit the like button, give me a follow, and this is 5 movies that actually scared me in some way that nobody talks about that deserve your attention. Listen, dementia is terrifying to me. This is like the Notebook on horror steroids, and it's about a World War II veteran that is forced by his family that he doesn't get along with to have this live-in nurse, but she has other plans and sinister secrets. Dementia is a fucking banger. Be warned, Landmine Goes Click is not a film to mess with. This has absolute heavy trigger warnings, and it's a terrifying film about 3 American tourists, and they're going across the countryside, and one of them steps on a live landmine. And that is when the nightmare begins, and trust me, it's not because of the fucking landmine. This is brutal, there is SA in it, and it gets under my skin because it's a terrifying situation that just literally is so fucked up. Banger. This movie has fucking scared me since the first time I seen it when I was a kid. I revisited it. It's still terrifying, and it's the ultimate fucking doll movie about a ventriloquist that is haunted by his dummy. Magic is a fucking masterpiece that's terrifying. They Look Like People is something that terrified me, and this is like a descent into madness that is so well portrayed that I couldn't imagine being in this man's shoes as he looks around and sees that all these people are turning evil and what he should do with those thoughts or if he's going crazy. It's best to go into this one blind, but this one unnerves me like a motherfucker. Rent-A-Pal is a fucked up movie that got under my skin that deals with a lot of different varieties of emotions, and it's about this man in 1990 who takes care of his mother with dementia, but is lonely, doesn't date, kind of like a square, and he finds this VHS tape called Rent-A-Pal and makes a new friend, and that's when things turn into a fucking nightmare. Genuinely an incredibly unnerving and scary movie. As always, let me know in the comments what you think about these 5. If you want me to make more lists, I'm Chuck. I'd love to be your movie guy. Hit the like button. Give me a follow.
Every spooky season, somebody asks me why we binge terrifying movies all October long, or if you're like me, all year. And it's actually a really interesting question. What draws humans to horror movies? So let's break it down. One reason is the thrill. I just rewatched Paranormal Activity on Max, and it is the perfect example of a horror movie that triggers our fight or flight response. When you hear those footsteps running towards you, but you can't see what's coming, it floods our bodies with adrenaline, and we crave that feeling because it exhilarates us, but at the same time we know that nothing can hurt us. Which leads us perfectly into our next reason, which is the safe exploration of fear. The first time I ever watched The Conjuring, it terrified me more than anything I had ever seen before. It brings us to terrifying places and gives us the craziest jump scares, but all the while we know that we're safe at home. This helps us confront our fears in a controlled way, which allows us to face our anxieties without real-world consequences. Even now, I rewatch The Conjuring and I still get a little taste of that fear that I've been chasing since my first watch. And finally, it allows us to see our favorite stories come to life. For example, Max's Stephen King collection brings you all the stories from the books you know and love, including the new adaptation of Salem's Lot. And if all this horror talk has you craving a movie that will haunt your dreams, head over to Max and binge their No Sleep collection for movies that will truly keep you up at night.
This happened in 2013, and this girl says she was dating a guy who was very religious. She says that he confided in her one of his biggest fears, and that was brujeria. He was basically terrified of like brujeria and all that. Everything was fine with them until one day a kid came to their college and joined their friend group, and this guy practiced santeria. She says that the mere presence of this guy was very mysterious and eerie, and she could tell that her boyfriend drew concern and was almost terrified of this guy. She said that with time, the relationship with her and the guy that practiced santeria became very, very close, to the point where they would share secrets and they would just confide in each other with things that you would never go around telling anybody else. They basically became like very, very close friends. She admits that after a while, the relationship between her and her boyfriend wasn't doing very well, so they broke up. However, after their breakup, she discovered that she was actually pregnant. Even though her and her ex-boyfriend had broken up, she says that he took the news very well and he was very civil and even gave her some options of baby names. So time has passed, and she admits that the farther and farther she would get with her pregnancy, she started to realize that weird things were happening around her. She says that night after night around 3 a.m. she would feel the weirdest sensation of being terrified, and she would almost wake up from her sleep by somebody pulling her hair. She would also hear things from the bedroom next to her. She could hear things falling and being thrown, and whenever she would go and check, everything would be in its place. She almost felt like something was really messing with her. She remembers one night where she was in between awake and asleep, and she started to hear a very strange sound. She says that it almost sounded like something dragging itself near her bedroom, almost like it was clawing its way to her. She admits that the sounds were so toned down, almost like if something was trying to not wake her up. However, she was already awake at that point, and she said that she got the craziest chill down her spine. In that moment is when she heard the craziest voice. It was a voice that was just out of this world.
I think she heard us. I think she's awake. Shh.
In that moment, she says she felt this cold sensation in her belly, and she could feel how tense her stomach was and how cold it was turning. She says that she was terrified and she was almost panicking, but she tried to remain calm because, again, she was pregnant and she was just thinking about the safety of her baby and how she didn't want anything bad to happen to it. She said she took a deep breath and mustered the courage to run to her mom's room and just stay there for the night. The very next day, she went to her grandmother's house and she explained to her everything that had been happening to her at nighttime, but more specifically what happened to her that night before. Her grandmother was very concerned and convinced to take her to her friend who was a curandera. The curandera told her that she needed to do a limpia because she could tell that 2 men were trying to do harm on her baby. She doesn't understand why, but instantly 2 people came to her mind. The guy that was practicing santeria and her ex-boyfriend. During the limpia, the words that the lady was saying just hit her like a ton of bricks because who she was describing was the guy and her ex, and the fact that they were trying to do harm to the baby. As they were doing the limpia, she started to feel better and better. Once the cleansing ended, she said that she felt like everything went back to normal. The very next day, almost like magic, her belly grew like drastically and she just felt better. It was almost as if her baby was finally growing, which is crazy. 3 weeks after that, she gave birth to a very healthy baby. Sadly, almost like confirmation that it was these two men, she had not heard a word from any of them. But she also knew that she might not hear from them because of what the curandera did. She sent everything bad that they wished on her back to them. I honestly never mess with brujeria, but I'm a big firm believer that if you do bad to people, that shit will come back to you as it should. If you guys want to listen to this story in Spanish, it's coming from Podcast Paranormal or Podcast Paranormal because it is in Spanish. But what do you guys think?
Our dad's house haunted. They're probably right.
And Turner was about to find out just how haunted this place actually was.
I will never forget opening up my closet and seeing a body hanging upside down, wrapped in plastic. This was obviously a woman because her head was down on the ground looking at me.
That man is Joseph William Lightfoot, and what he is describing right now is the day that he found out that his own father was a serial killer.
My father was James Lightfoot, and people just called him Lightfoot. My dad, he was okay when I was growing up, but turned out he was a serial killer. And he killed like 18 women. Some he tortured, and some he violated, and the rest he ate.
Now, Turner was heading to the Lightfoot house simply because it was being used as a rental vacation home now, and the reviews for it all said the same thing. The place is haunted. And they weren't wrong.
You know the Bruno Mars song?
If the world was ending, I wanna be next to you.
Die with a Smile, Lady Gaga and Bruno Mars. Bruno Mars wrote this song after the finale of Attack on Titan, bro. It's the perspective of Eren thinking about Mikasa at the end of Attack on Titan.
Oh, what the?
Spoiler alert first, because this is gonna spoil Attack on Titan. Eren Yeager, he woke up in the beginning of season 1, episode 1 of Attack on Titan from a dream. The dream was him seeing the whole future about what happens, how everybody goes to war, fighting, and it's pretty much the end of the world. I just woke up from a dream where you and I had to say goodbye. That's Eren.
Okay.
That's Mikasa. At the end of Attack on Titan, Mikasa has to kill Eren and say goodbye to him to save the entire world. If you listen to the whole song and really feel it, that feels like, and he said it himself, he wrote it because of how he was feeling.
Oh, he said it?
Yeah, he said it in the interview.
Oh.
April 11th, 2005. It's a very normal Monday afternoon, and Mr. A, well, let's call him Mr. A, is at home watching TV, and he hears this knock at his door. Mr. A gets up, and he walks to the door, looks through the tiny little peephole, and he sees his neighbor, a middle-aged man, Mr. Wu, just standing there, looking very anxious. Mr. Wu, what's wrong? How can I help you? Mr. Wu leans in closer to the door. Call an ambulance. What? Mr. A fumbles with his locks, and by the time he opens the door, Mr. Wu is gone. He looks to the right, he looks to the left. No Mr. Wu. He didn't even know middle-aged men could move that fast. That's wild. So he grabs his phone, puts on his jacket and his shoes, and he starts making his way over to Mr. Wu's house, which is at the top of a neighboring building. It's a 3-story building, and Mr. Wu is at the top. That's his residence, 3rd floor. So he's running up the stairs. He approaches the door. He doesn't see Mr. Wu anywhere. He's nowhere to be seen. He presses on the handle of Mr. Wu's front door. The door creaks open, and a fly comes flying out at him. So strange. He walks inside, and once he sees why an ambulance needs to be called, Mr. A runs back out of the house. He's dry heaving on the pavement and immediately calls the police. When the police arrive at the scene, they can hear flies buzzing around the house. They walk further in, and on the dining table, they find a whole table setting laid out. Plates, bowls. The bowls are filled with fulu, a talismanic paper soaked in water, and the plates are smeared with the main dish, the main course. Feces. Poop. In one of the bedrooms, there's a 28-year-old woman lying motionless on the floor. They rush her to the hospital, but it is no luck. She has been dead for 2 days before the police found her body. The hospital starts an autopsy on the woman, and her whole body looks incredibly pale. Her entire stomach, the only thing in there is no food. Nothing but just semi-digested feces. The sheer volume of feces would indicate it was most likely human feces. So why? How? I mean, who did this to her? The police are able to confirm that the deceased woman is the eldest daughter of the Wu family, the residence that she was found in, which means the people most likely to have answers to what happened to her are her family members. But there is no trace of the rest of the Wu family. After Mr. Wu knocked on his neighbor's door, he vanished, along with his wife and his 2 daughters and his 1 son. All 5 of them are gone. They hadn't taken any belongings, nothing. They just disappeared into thin air from this house.
In this video, you learn about the penguin cult that fights monsters.
Nope. So we got penguin. Oh, it's like the other one. Oh, wow. Oh, man. Set it on fire. I seen that one coming. Clear. Make sure you say clear. They don't learn, dude. You have to say clear. Oh, man. My goodness. That's so gross. Dad. Yep. Oh my god, it's oh my goodness. So we just set everything on fire. Is that the only solution in this series? Is like just set stuff on fire? Y'all saying it's the thing? I don't know what that is. What did you do? Oh, and it took your dynamite. Ew. Oh. Always keep a stick on them.
Just when I thought Netflix had dropped the ball on horror movies, they deliver us this little gem and completely prove me wrong. This movie was such a gift. Literally a little box with a bow on it, hand-delivered to horror lovers. I went into this movie completely blind, and I honestly recommend that you do the same. I didn't watch a trailer. I didn't really read anything about it. So let's start there. The storyline of this movie is so unique and so well written and well paced. I know I said to go in blind, so jump ahead a little bit if you don't want to hear anything about the plot, but for those of you that do, so just a brief explanation. This movie is about this group of friends that gets together at this house the night before one of the friends' wedding. And one of their friends they haven't seen in a while shows up with this weird contraption, and it turns out that it's this game that if they all hook up to, they all switch their consciousness into somebody else's body. The game aspect of it is that they have to try and guess who is in whose body. First of all, just the way that was portrayed, because obviously the actors look like one person, but they're supposed to be playing a different person because that other person is in them. And the way that they used the color and the lighting to show that at parts was so beautiful and so satisfying. And again, the storyline itself was so well paced and really smart in the way that they made things play out. At no point in this movie did I know which direction it was going to go. Because just as you think it's going in one direction, a twist happens and slaps you in the face. And then you literally think you're at the end of the movie and all the twists are done, and then another twist slaps you in the face. And this one is probably the biggest one of the whole fucking movie. It kept me on my toes from beginning to end. I was so locked into this movie. And it was shocking and unpredictable up until the very last scene. I feel like these days it is getting so much harder to make a horror movie that surprises an audience, especially surprises people who are seasoned horror watchers, but this one pulled it off. I think the actors in this movie all did great because they're essentially playing more than one role because they have to play themselves, but they also have to play their friends. I loved it. And Netflix, honestly, I'm sorry for talking shit because this just completely surpassed any expectations I had of a Netflix movie. I give this an 8.5 out of 10. I can't wait to go back and watch it again knowing the plot twist and knowing how it ends to see what else I can find and pick out. It's one of those where I feel like every time you watch it, you're going to catch something new knowing how it ends.
There's so many underrated scary movies out there. Oh, you thought I was done making lists? No, I'm Chuck. I'd love to be your movie guy. Hit that like button, give me a follow, and there's a plethora of scary movies. We're knee-deep in the middle of spooky season. I have another list. This is Scary Movies That Are Actually Scary, Part 7. Let's fucking go. Dark Water. Don't be fooled by the 2005 remake with Jennifer Connelly. This is the one from 2002. It's subtitled and it's about a woman going through a divorce. that moves into this ratty rundown apartment with her daughter. There's a leak, water starts getting in, all kinds of shit starts happening. This one will get under your skin. Evidence is about this dude Ryan, who's making a documentary film about his friend Brett in his first time camping, and there may or may not be a presence in the woods. This is found footage, you know what to expect, but this one has some genuinely creepy and shocking moments that will get to you. Listen, The Call on Netflix might be one of the most criminally underrated films they've ever dropped, and it's about this lady, Seo Yun, who lives in the present, and Young Suk, who lives in the past. They're in different fucking times, and there's a phone call that connects them and the events that happen. Listen, this one is convoluted. It has a mixed up ending, but it fucking gets under your skin. It's thrilling. Listen, this is a fucking banger. I never seen nobody talk about the last will and testament of Rosamund Lee, and it's about this dude, Leon, that moves into his deceased mother's gothic home, and there's a malevolent presence, and there may be a cult and some other shit going on. But listen, not a perfect movie, but this is a haunted house spooky one that there's scenes and shit that will get under your skin. Banger. I'll be the first to admit that I never gave White Noise its fair day in court. I didn't really like this movie when I seen it whenever it came out. But listen, I rewatched this about a week and a half ago, and this movie has aged so well. Michael Keaton is an architect that wants to talk to his dead wife and communicate, and there's some supernatural presence that comes through that he can hear. The Adam Driver one from 2022 is dog shit, but listen, go back, revisit White Noise, because listen, I watched this in an all-dark living room, very loud sound, and this fucker got to me this time. White Noise is a low-key banger. So let me know down in the comments what you think of these, and if you want part 8, I'm Chuck. I'd love to be your movie guy. Hit the like button. Give me a follow.
I can't believe I'm about to say this, but Netflix have just dropped a good horror film. Not just a good horror film, a bloody excellent horror film. One that might be in my top 5 favourite films this whole year. My name's Ricky, I love horror movies, and this is It's What's Inside. That's a tongue twister. The movie was directed by Greg Jardin and centres around a group of friends who are getting together the day before one of their friends' wedding. So the group of friends have known each other for a really long time. They all went to college together. And because of that, they have a very complicated history, and their relationship as a collective comes with a lot of baggage. In particular, there is this one guy called Forbes. Some shit went down in the past with Forbes, and nobody's really seen him since. He's invited to this party, but nobody thinks he's going to turn up until he does. And that's when Forbes introduces this device that he's carrying with him. And that's as far as I'm going to go in regards to the plot with this film. So first off, I didn't think I was going to like this movie, because within the first kind of 20 minutes of this film, it was very hectic, it was very modern, and it had a lot of, tropes that I didn't like, text messages on screen, that kind of stuff. It's a very modern film. But I think the biggest testament to how this film, or why this film is so good, is by the story itself. The acting performances made me not care about any of that stuff. And they kind of get it out of the way at the beginning. It doesn't permeate throughout the entire film. But because of that first 20 minutes, I thought that this entire movie was going to be some kind of teen drama trash all the way through. But this movie proved me wrong. There are elements of the whole teen drama thing that runs through this, for sure. But this movie is really, really stylish. I love the cinematography in this movie. I love how artistic this movie is with its lighting. It's rare that we get a movie these days with really modern characters that is shot this way, that almost is a callback or is inspired to films from the past. There is one scene in particular in this movie which could have almost been taken out of A Clockwork Orange. And I'd also mention that if you like the show Black Mirror, you should really get on with this as well. It's an extremely convoluted story. You really do have to pay attention, so you do have to be dialed in. It's not a movie I think you can watch with distractions, because I don't think you'll quite grasp what's going on, because I was fully dialed in, fully invested, and I was still struggling to figure out what the fuck was happening in this film. But delightfully so. It was a joy to sit through this film and try and figure it out. And I will fully admit that I judged this movie too soon. This movie is asking us many questions about modern life. But the movie also delves into fundamental ideas about what it means to be human, what it means to be comfortable within your own skin. This idea of, if we lived for a day in somebody else's skin, would we want to go back or not? It's a movie about accepting and loving yourself for who you are. And it's a movie about complicated friendships and complicated relationships. I highly recommend you check this movie out.
For those of you that have seen Terrifier 3, we need to talk right the fuck now. Because the shower scene was actually not the most disturbing scene for me. But this shit with Vicky was. Someone fucking explain to me right now, what the fuck was the scene with Vicky with the glass shard all about? Because what? Out of any scene in this movie, the glass shard was the shit that had my fucking stomach rolling in knots. What the fuck was the point of that scene at all? Because I kid you not, out of any scene in that movie, and you know how vile it was, that was the one where, I kid you not, I was like getting sick, but nothing else bothered me. What was the point of the glass shard scene with Vicky? Somebody explain. That was fucking twisted and sick. Somebody explain, because what?